welcome back to Teamsters Talk podcast with myself, TC, and Adam Ochoa. Good evening, Adam.
Good evening.
Adam, do me a favor tonight. I would like you, in your own words, to define the word strike for us.
Strike. So strike is when, and we're talking union strike, right?
Yes.
When a contract has expired, or would be even after it's been negotiated and voted on, it's been voted down. When the two sides, both management and the union side, can't come to an agreement, the union will at times call a strike, which is authorized by the members in some way, whether they take a strike vote. Generally, Teamster elections, a no vote in a contract is a strike authorization for the union. I know on the ballots for our white paper contracts, not the UPS contract, but on the ballot, it even says, a no vote is a strike authorization. So what that means is that the union is then going to deprive the employer of their labor, and they will no longer report to work. They'll report to a strike line. And we'll get into kind of what that means later, but right. So you're depriving that employer of your labor. In other words, not allowing them to do business because they don't have any workers. So that's kind of a simplistic, analogy of it, but it is. It's the union depriving the employer of their labor, and it is obviously that is the sort of the last stance when you can't come to an agreement.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So this is being episode 4. We're doing this one on, are we going to strike? That question is on everybody's minds. I know it's on my mind. I'm sure it's on Adam's as well. Across the country, you got about 330,000 people wondering, are we going to strike? More than that, if you include management wondering if we're going to strike. And it's a good question. We want to explore that today on our episode. We want to explore what a strike is. We want to explore what it means to us, why we fear it sometimes, why we welcome it sometimes, and kind of what the history of that is. We want to explore all aspects of striking and maybe come to as close of an answer to that question, are we going to strike, as we can by the end of the episode. That being said, I would like to point out that we are not official representation of the local union office or the International Brotherhood of Teamsters as a whole. We are two members of Teamsters in good standing, and this is simply a public forum for an opinion-based conversation about our rights, about being a Teamsters member, and all that involves. So moving forward, I'd like to read from Statista. The largest strike in U.S. history was the steel strike of 1959, which lasted 116 days between July and November of 1959. The strike involved 500,000 workers and members of the United Steelworkers of America Union due to a dispute over wages and changes to workplace rules. As seen in many other countries around the world, this year, the United States is experiencing a revival of the labor movement. Strike action and efforts to unionize various workforces have made headlines across the country, and public support for labor unions is at an all-time high. Now, there's more to this, but I want to say that the deal they got involved a 24% pay increase over 5 years, plus $5,000 in bonuses, though they were getting stalemated over having paid sick leave, and that was something that the law didn't support back then. So here's some things that unions have done for us over history. Because of the union, not necessarily Teamsters, but unions as a whole, because of them, we've developed the weekend, where many jobs have weekends off. We've also put an end to child labor, which was a big one very early on. We have 40-hour work week because of unions, 8-hour work days, unemployment benefits, workers' compensation laws, employer-based health coverage, Family and Medical Leave Act. Many, many good things have come because of workers unionizing together and creating leverage in order to get our bosses to see that we're human beings. But we all fear, not just management, but the reality is, as workers, we all fear striking because there's reasons to fear striking. And those are all valid. Nobody's going to take those away from you. We all have trepidation. We all have worries. How are our bills going to get paid? How are we going to function? We have families. We have kids. Sometimes we have people with medical concerns. These are all valid reasons to be worried or to even fear having a strike. But what are the alternatives? Adam, talk to us about the fear that comes with an impending strike or a possible strike, and why that is, some of the concerns you've heard in your own career, and help us understand those fears, and maybe help us to get through some of those fears.
Well, the number one fear usually for people is financial, right? We all go to work for a reason, to support our families, to make a better life for ourselves. So when you talk about not going to work and not getting paid, that's a big deal, right? That everything, our whole ability to support our families and to, in some cases, survive depends on our ability to go out and generate revenue with our labor. So that's why, when we'll talk about, I guess it's a good time to talk about it, is that's why unions have developed a strike fund. And while that strike fund doesn't replace your income per se, it does offset some of the loss, right? So if you've got the strike fund coming in, maybe you save some money. Like you've heard, since early in the year, when you started hearing things from the international IBT coming back about, preparing for a strike. The number one thing you can do to prepare for a strike is to, on an individual basis, is to save some money. Because if you save money to sort of weather the storm, then you're not in a position of desperation, right? Management is, their leverage is how long can they wait you out. So, let's say we go on strike and we're out there on the street and we're picketing and we're on strike. The longer we are out there, the longer they're in essence not running their business, but we are also not making money. So it's a standoff of attrition. Who can wait the other one out the longest? If our members have waited, I've been out there a month or so, and I saw something that was put out by the International just recently by the general president that a UPS strike costs the company about $200 million a day. So it's no small change. Yes, they've got a lot of money, right? Billions, but they also have investors and people like that to answer to, and those people don't want to lose money either, right? That causes investors to pull their money. So it goes both ways. So two things: best thing to prepare for a strike is to financially be ready for that, and most of all is us sticking together as members. And we talked about this on the last episode, right? That's something that our leadership has to be gauging as they're, getting closer to that deadline where the potential strike could be, is what is the temperament of the members? Are they unified? If they're unified and they're strong, then you have a good chance to win a strike. If they're not unified, or you don't feel they're strong, that's when you start looking for ways to not strike. And that's just something that our leaders have to gauge. And that's why you see them early on saying, get ready, right? Because if they had to wait last minute and then go, you know what, guys, looks like we're not going to get what we want. They're trying to force concessions down our throat. Hey, let's strike. It wouldn't happen. So I guess in some parts, the fear of a strike kind of keeps us all getting prepared. Sort of like, any country, the fear of war keeps us preparing for war. You hope you never have to do it, but we've got some signs passed around the building that say ready to strike if necessary. That's what that means. And we're prepared. We're not looking to strike. If anybody says they just want to strike just to strike, because they're, and I've you hear that sometimes, they're mad at the company. They don't like a certain rule, an emotional issue. What we want to do is always keep what we got and get a little more. And sometimes getting a little more means that we change something, right? That's not always monetary. As many hours as UPSers put in, what happens at work sometimes is just as valuable as how much you get paid, right? For me personally, the ability for our members through the union to enforce the contract is just as important as making money. Because if the contract's unenforceable, because it doesn't have enough teeth to enforce, and we have great language. We have great language for the most part. There's things that obviously we're talking about changing, but if you can't enforce that language with something that makes UPS stop violating it, then the language, loses its value. So that's just that's the biggest concern. I know me and Tom were just at the recent membership meeting, and our local representatives, give an update. And because they're under a confidentiality agreement, they can't give specifics. But there has been a little bit of a change in the recent tone that both sides seem to be thinking that they're going to have an agreement now, possibly within a month to 2 months. And you hope that that's them speaking genuinely, that's how they feel. But there's still so many unresolved issues. National negotiations just started. Any one of those major issues could turn that whole negotiation the other direction, right? Things could be going great, and I've been in several negotiations, like we've talked before, not just UPS, but other companies. And man, you're just going along, and it seems like you got good momentum, and then all of a sudden this issue becomes a really big deal for either side, right? So that's something that, while things seem to be trending a little better now, we shouldn't let our guard down until we have a contract in our hands to vote on. And even then, right, especially with the confidentiality agreement that's been signed with the representatives, we're going to get something that's, for the most part, very organic. We're not going to have a good sense of what it is until we read it, because they're not allowed to update us. So that's something that we need to be prepared for. And then once we get that, I can't emphasize enough to members, you're going to have, I'm sure, multiple ratification meetings. Attend one of those meetings. Don't just get it and go, oh, well, and vote yes or no because somebody told you, including me or Tom here, right? I'm sure when that comes out, we'll probably do one of these videos on breaking down what the proposals are, and we'll give our opinions. But we're not going to be able to cover everything in detail. You're going to need to read that proposal, sit down with your significant other, or if that's the case for you, and is this a problem for us? Is it not? Take the time to read it, because we talked about this before. When I was at the local, I can't tell you how many times members from whatever company would come back and say, well, when did that change in the contract, right? And you're like, well, they talked about that at the ratification meeting, and You know, they gave you a new contract and it's in there, and I don't read that stuff. I don't go to those meetings. You don't want to. It's obviously it's a really bad thing to learn your contract after the fact, right? When you've missed something or you missed a process because you didn't pay attention to that. So take a look at that, and we'll talk a little more about that later on.
Thank you, Adam. So I'm curious, the reverse side of, or the opposite side of fear is why is it good? Why should we be on board, ready to go, and super supportive, not dragging our feet, but ready to just storm in there and take the fight to the company if it comes to a strike?
Well, some of the things you talked about earlier, Tom, you know, what unions have done for us, you know, the weekend, 40-hour work week, overtime. Most of that stuff has been won by labor, unions in general, through strikes, right? Where either, you know, these large employers, you know, they control a lot, right? Including our representatives in Sacramento and Washington. They're big donors, right? They want to be catered to. Legislators cater to them for obvious reasons, right? They hold a lot of power. And sometimes, you know, like when we've done lobbying in Sacramento, and the corporations always outspend us 10-1, probably, if not more, because they have that kind of money. So at some point in time, unions across the board have had to strike to fix the issue. And I'm, like I said, like me and Tom said before, that's not what we're saying is going to happen here, but you know, it's always a potential. And when an employer just decides, no, I'm not going to do it, and the union has, you know, made it very clear that this is a legitimate issue that they need to fix, that's kind of where that ends up. That's sort of the art of being a negotiator, is, you know, trying to get both sides to see the light on both sides, right? And I'm sure there's things being asked of us that the company thinks are, you know, reasonable, and they may be, right? We don't know what those are at this point for the most part. Some of the things that are coming back, you know, that have been released through the press releases from the IBT and your local unions and NorCal committee, are literally just our representatives trying to get UPS to fix problems that they should just, you know, do. They continue to have payroll errors, like, just unbelievably, right? So when you propose that, hey, here's a solution to fix that, and they don't want to hear it, right? It's just, well, we'll work on it. Well, Tom's been there as long as I have, almost 30 years for both of us, and it's always been a struggle for them. You know, getting people paid on time, vacation, accruals. I mean, so at some point, they're not willing, and that's a prime example. What if people aren't getting paid? It doesn't get any more personal than that, right? And they're being now having to wait for their money. And then the penalty pay, you know, is, you know, a couple hours, but a couple hours of pay, you wait 2 weeks to get paid. Unfortunately, it's been going on so long, the only real fix is stricter penalties. And the great thing for UPS is it's totally in their control, right? They let's just say we agree to some huge penalty for payroll errors. They can literally reduce that liability to zero by just fixing the problem, right? So it costs them nothing, but they seem to be always very, you know, resistant or just refusal to agree to things to just fix problems that we're not even asking for something like, hey, some new, some big raise or some work rule that, you know, would be a problem for them. It's literally just paying people. So that's things, and that's when a strike becomes necessary, and that's, hey, the last strike was UPS wanted to take control of our pension, and like we talked about in the previous videos, when you see what they've done to their management pensions and retirements, that was a great thing that never happened, because, you know, the fact that, well, for us in NorCal, we're under the Western Conference, and the Western Conference is, you know, autonomous of both sides. Right? They make the decisions on what's best for the fund, which means what's best for the retirees, not what's best for UPS or any of the employers in the Western Conference. UPS isn't the only one in that pension, right? There's, I think it's a couple hundred. And you don't want either side making a decision based on what's good for them personally, but for what's best for the retirees. And they're required by law to do that. But you know, if the employer controlled that completely, then that would be a different story. So, but once again, that's Tom's point. What is a strike necessary when there's something that is so important to one side? Usually the union, whether it's a concession they just refuse to accept or a problem that they need to have fixed. When the company will not move on that, then the members have the right to vote that down and authorize their local union or their union in general, in this case, to deprive the employer of their labor.
Well, that brings up another good topic. You've discussed like what was what they were trying to do on that last one with the pension. So that brings me to, well, this year, 2023, what are some of those strike issues we're hearing about?
Well, the number one is probably the 224 classification. I know our general president has said that that is a strike issue. He's said it multiple times, and in other words, if it's not removed, he said all package car drivers should be regular package car drivers as they were previously. The 224 classification, in essence, took what used to be utility drivers and made it a full-time job. It was always intended to be part inside, part drive, with a full-time classification, a higher salary, a combined higher salary, full-time seniority, and all that. It just turned into a drive job, not inside drive. And it was never intended to be that, but UPS, sort of took advantage of that. COVID didn't help. And so it didn't work out, right? It didn't work to its nature. And their volume and their business has exploded because of COVID. I mean, right now it's down a little. Of course, they'll blame us for that and say that it's because, customers are worried about us going on strike. And there is a little bit of that every 5 years, right? The competition, I think FedEx went out and told our customers if we didn't have you don't switch over to us, by some deadline, right? We won't be able to help you come August 1st. And that happens every 5 years. That's just normal cycle of doing business. But we are also coming into the heart of, a recession. So when I hear management say, yeah, if it wasn't for this, potential strike that you guys are threatening, we're losing business. I personally tend to think it's more of a recession issue. We hear about it every day in the news. All of us, we see it at the pumps, we see it at the grocery store. There's just less money to go around. That discretionary income to go and buy all the stuff online, which is the bulk of our business, right? Online purchases, has reduced. You see all the layoffs in the news, hundreds of thousands of layoffs from everybody from Amazon to Apple to whoever. It's more about that than it is about us, potentially striking. And that's just part of that cycle. So it's sort of a perfect storm right now. But hey, to that point, if UPS claims that they're losing business because there's a threat of a strike, well, then start negotiating, right? Stop stalling on things. On our NorCal supplement and I believe the 89 supplement in Louisville are the only two still open. And there's a reason for that, right? We're not still open because they're just willing to work with us. We're still open because there's issues on both of those supplements that UPS has just refused to even, address the issue. So, hey, if it hurts you that bad, then UPS, you have a decision to make. Are you losing so much money that this issue you won't fix in these two supplements or issues is such a big deal? Then get to work. Because I'm confident that the people on our side of the table are willing to work as much as it takes, right? They'll put in the long days. I've been in that room before, and I mean, we've been in there till 1 a.m. sometimes, waiting for the company to come back on one proposal that they take, hours and hours and hours, and they come back with no, right? Not a solution. It's just no, and it's a stall most of the time, because the committee members on NorCal put a lot of work into getting those proposals and trying to address them to something that will work for both sides. And UPS generally is just no, no, no until the last minute, and then it's yes or a final no. So UPS just needs to get off the ball and work with the union to fix those issues. Otherwise, and that's the other thing. We're in a national contract, so something that us in NorCal and our brothers and sisters in Louisville, is it's so great that they're willing to lose volume nationwide to not get that settled. I find that a little disingenuous. I think that they're trying to leverage certain things against those two supplements to, hey, the rest of your brothers and sisters have already agreed, and that's great, right? We're happy for them. We're more than happy that they've got their supplement wrapped up, but don't take our two supplements and say, hey, you guys should be more reasonable and just agree to this stuff that you don't like, because that's not going to happen. And I'm confident that it won't at this point. So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you, Adam. So what are some other, so you said the 22.4, are there any other issues they've deemed as strike issues?
I know the releases from our NorCal committee. One of them is payroll errors, vacation accruals. I mean, my vacation's wrong this year. They're still trying to fix a week that they owe me. So there you go, right? And I've been there almost 30 years. And we actually fixed the same problem last year. Addressed it with the labor manager. They fixed it, and it's the same problem again this year. They can't. And that's another thing with UPS. They have so many different systems that don't work together that you'll fix it one year and it doesn't tell another. You would think you would fix that and all their systems would recognize it, but it doesn't. And that's part of their problem. But so vacation accruals, payroll errors are some of the things I've talked about, seniority violations. And this is a big one. This actually probably is right under 224 is the forced 6th and 7th day punches. To your point, hey, unions created the weekend, but they've been forcing people in on 6 days, forever. And I think there was a long time ago when me and Tom first went full time where that was basically the Saturday before Christmas was the only, Saturday where you were forced. They literally put up a thing and said, listen, everybody's coming into work today. Maybe the occasional forced holiday. I mean, then became the day after Thanksgiving. People started getting forced in, which leads to another point. Holidays are another big issue that are holding up our NorCal supplement. Number one, holidays that we get, and number two, a holiday is a holiday, right? So what happens when I get forced to work a holiday? Yeah, you paid me overtime, but really there's got to be something more to protect that. If it's so important that the company has to use you, my opinion, and I believe I put this in my proposal, I'm not sure, I have to double check, but you forced me to work that holiday, yeah, I get the overtime because I'm working, but I should also get a floating holiday to replace that, because me working doesn't get me the time off, right? I mean, what if you forced me to work all my vacations? Well, great, that money doesn't do, I wanted to go on vacation, right? Which they don't do, but that I've always believed if I get forced, now if I volunteer, which company puts up a list, who wants to work, they get enough volunteers, hey, I volunteered. But when they don't, then they force from the bottom up, right? That's contractual. But if you're going to force me in, then I should get a floating holiday to replace that at least. It doesn't replace the fact of having it on the exact day when all my family's off, like a day after Thanksgiving. But at least it gives me a day to recover with my family and say, hey, I didn't get that time off, but I'll make up that time with my family or whatever obligation I have for that matter. It's not always family. I'll have a day off. But they just, have been unwilling to move according to the releases we're getting. And so that's where we're at. That's one of the reasons that 4th, 6th day and holiday issues is one of the major reasons holding up our supplement right now.
What about PVDs? Did they make that one a strike issue?
I believe the general president has said it's a strike issue. We'd have to look at that again, but I know we've talked previous episodes. To me, that is a strike issue.
Yeah, to me too.
If we're going to allow it, it needs to be just extremely restrictive, right? I mean, it's got to be under some type of an emergency thing. COVID would be a good example, right? Because they were hiring drivers to try to keep up with the volume, but as they were hiring them, people were going home sick and staying home because of COVID, right? Packages were piling up everywhere. So there was a need, and those people paid union dues. There was a need to do something to free the system up and to give our own regular people a day off. Because I know when they first started using the PVDs in our building, guys were a little relieved, brothers and sisters, because man, they were just getting destroyed, and there was no hope in sight. So, something like that, possibly, the union would have to really sit down and think about what that emergency would be, or what the parameters would be, because UPS in its nature would then look to call everything an emergency, and so that would be a project. But if we're going to continue to allow them, it needs to be, and that also includes subcontracting the feeder work, right? UPS gets these subcontractors, which, by the way, they own Coyote Logistics, which is their number one company they use to subcontract with. So they're subcontracting it with UPS employees anyways. Why not just hire more feeder drivers?
Right.
So,
yeah, and I don't to your point, even the emergency situation. UPS they're infamous for creating their own emergencies so that they have to do that stuff, and that's just not. I'm not against having zero emergency clauses in the contract and just force them to deal with it. You know what? Other companies have gone through times when they've fallen behind in flow, but they get it caught up or whatever. I've seen, I think, one Christmas and I think it was during the pandemic, when we actually fell behind with it, which is really unusual for us. But I think we fell behind by a week on some of that flow, but we banged it out. We did our best. We got it caught back up, and I don't think it took that long. So honestly, I hate to put emergency clauses anywhere in the contract because it's a company. Just follow the rules and deal with it the best you can. That's my opinion. But I like the holiday suggestion, by the way. I'd never heard that before, and it makes more sense.
Well, and the contract does speak in some certain places, and labor contracts in general will speak to emergencies very definitively: earthquake, natural disaster, loss of public utilities, right? And specifically a few things, which takes all the interpretation out, right? It doesn't matter who thinks it's an emergency. It's defined as what an emergency is. And I think if we just take those two or three things right there, we could all see where, well, for us, an earthquake would probably be the most likely in California. We don't get hurricanes, we don't get anything like that. Loss of public utilities, I guess you could put that in there. The thing is, if you lose public utilities, what are you going to do? I guess to your point, Tom, you might just be delayed a day, right? And I think your average customer, when you tell them, hey, the power went out in Visalia yesterday, nobody could run anything, your package, you're going to get your package tomorrow. How often does that happen, right? Very, very rare, especially now with this new facility we have. To lose all power. In fact, they're just installing all the backup generators right now. They put all the solar on it. We've actually had a few power outages there, but they last like temporarily. I think one time it did go out for a few hours on the twilight, but those things are so minor and so infrequent that I don't know that there's a reason to work a holiday because of that.
Right. Oh, good point. It's it's funny because I can't help but think, like you said, earthquake would be one of the probably one of the major issues with UPS. I feel like we'd have to put what Richter.
That's a great point, because you'd have some little minor shaker, right? That hardly anybody felt, and they go, well, there was an earthquake, so we're all working tomorrow. That's a great point. But it does. I could just see that, and
Yep.
that's some of the things that hold up negotiations too. Is you have to try to make your proposals so bulletproof from reinterpretation that, man, you end up with what turned out to be like a 3-line proposal is now 2 pages. So it's, that's a great point. But maybe we'll probably, I guess we'll talk about it later what your strike benefits are. But that is just one of the things that we talked earlier about. The financial issue is what are our strike benefits, and I guess we'll move to that. But it's
go ahead, Adam.
It's 5 times your dues. So we'll just use a flat number. If your dues were $100 a month, or $100 a month, then your strike benefit would be $500 a week. And something that I just came to my mind is Local 948 has a $3 assessment on our dues. So we'll need to check with our local union to see if that assessment is also figured into the 5 times factor. So for us that would add another $15, but give or take. But you can always count on the five times your dues rate. For part timers, that's not a bad gig. Full timers, it's less of a compensation. But I always say the full timers make a lot more money during the year, so they have the ability to save more than a part timer does, right? A lot of our part timers are working 2nd and 3rd jobs. And the other thing in NorCal, and I'll speak we're in NorCal General for our health and welfare in Visalia. The Bay Area has a few different funds, but we need to also check to see that we will lose benefits. As far as I'm aware, we'll have benefits in August because we've worked July. And if you're full time, you've got to have 80 hours in the month to have benefits for the following next month. Part timers, it's 60 hours. So just a thing, make sure in July you work as many hours as you can, because you want to make sure you get enough to get your benefits for the following month. After that, if it goes more than a month, then there is the potential for you to lose your medical for the next month. And I know, Tom, you mentioned that for some people it's medical. It might not be financial. So that's something that everybody, and part-timers especially, part-timers code 5 a lot, take the day off. They're always sending people home. Make sure you get 60 hours in July. You're guaranteed 3.5, so you're guaranteed plenty of hours to get it. But those, go home early, go home at the beginning of the sort. They love to code 5 part-timers on every sort, usually on a daily basis. Avoid that as much as you can in July, because you really need to get your hours. You need to make your benefits. Last thing you want is for you and your family to lose your benefits. And a lot of times you've probably lost them and didn't know them because the following month you didn't use them. So you didn't even realize you lost them. But make sure you get them, because you don't want to be out on strike and then you or your spouse or one of your children falls ill, or God forbid some accident or something happens and you need that medical and it's not there. Because that will, last thing we want anything is our brothers and sisters to have some type of major medical issue and it not be able to be covered.
Good point. How do we, I had a question for you. How do we receive those? If we go on strike, how do we receive those funds?
So previously, and I'm not sure exactly how they're going to come this time. Previously, they were given to the local union, and we got those. This is 1997. Our representatives handed them to us at the strike line. We signed for them. But I'm not sure how they're going to do that this time. If we're going to get them from our local representatives, if they're going to mail them to us. That's something that we'll have to check. In fact, we'll make a note of that, Tom, just to double check that. But it would make sense to give them on the strike line, because the assumption is that we're all reporting, right? Mm-hmm. So we should check on that. And that's something that, you know, I've got to give our leadership for the last, well, 20 plus years since the 97 strike. The leadership at that time, the general president was Ron Carey, called us on strike. We went on strike. You didn't get strike benefits back then for the first week, which just recently, those of us who were delegates of the convention unanimously voted to do first day benefits, which now we get paid, you know, day one. And that was done by, you know, that was a unanimous decision by all the delegates, not any one group. Back then, you didn't get them for the first week. So that first week, we were out, 2.5 weeks, I believe. We didn't get any benefits. So, okay, no strike check. The next week they came and it was $50 and they took union dues out of it. So you can imagine how that kind of went. Since then, our leadership at the IBT has changed that. The strike fund under that leadership, I believe most of that was done under President Hoffa and General Secretary Treasurer Ken Hall. They built that strike fund up to a massive amount. I believe last time I saw it was like $325 million. So our strike fund is healthy. Our current leadership has that as a tool, and management knows, right? Management knows what's in our strike fund. It's public knowledge. We haven't made it a secret, and that in itself, when you talk about preparing, that our leadership at the IBT has prepared us with a strike fund. The delegates made the change to put everybody first day benefits. That's all leverage in our favor, because it all makes our membership stronger, knowing that they have some financial protection to weather the storm. Management knowing that, because if management knew we had nothing coming in, right away, all their propaganda and all their stuff is going to be directed to our members about, look, they don't care about you. You're out there for what? But there is some offset, so that's a good thing. Despite sometimes our politics, this still is the greatest union in the world, and I'm glad to see that the leadership has taken the role to make sure that we have that. So that's a good thing.
Me too. So you brought up 97. So you and I are two survivors of a strike. We have been through it ourselves. I was one of the lucky ones, just by pure chance, because I was a young, dumb part-timer back then, and didn't know anything about this stuff. And by pure chance and luck, the first week of that strike, I got paid for it because I was on vacation that week. So I didn't have to suffer, quite as much. But I did go out there on the line on my vacation, and stood there, side by side with my brothers and sisters, striking against the company. It was eye-opening, and I remember, the joke around the line was that the drivers' garages had never been more immaculate. What was your personal, story from around that strike? You got any?
So, and I have some pictures I found the other day that someone gave to me. And it's funny, you can tell they're 1997, right? Because it was analog camera. But it's inspiring, because the whole street was full. We were marching up and down with our picket signs, and just kind of looking at it, looks like there's about 100 people out there, which back then that was probably the whole building. Because before we moved into this new building with all the mass hiring, we had about 280, 290 people in 2020. So that was probably the bulk of the workforce, right? So that was a great show of unity. Also on that strike line, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but this union isn't just UPS, right? In our local, we've got Del Monte, Stanislaus, Stanislaus Foods, 2 Del Monte facilities, actually, one here in Tulare County, one in Stanislaus County in Modesto. Stanislaus Foods there. Here in the South Valley, we've got Ruan. We've got all the Bimbo drivers delivering the breads, the uniform companies, Mission Linen, C-Mex, Viking Ready Mix, Sven Hard's Bakery. So when you look at those pictures, and I remember this specifically, back then before Bimbo bought all the bread and pastry companies, it was Oral Wheat, it was various bread companies all being delivered. Those guys would stop by because those stores, those companies used to have their clearance stuff, right? The bread that had to come back because it was about to expire or going to expire. Nothing wrong with it. It just, the stores, you got certain rules. They would bring us food and bread and, stuff like that. I mean, the Del Monte people were coming by and bringing us, fresh food, cooked food. People were dropping off water. I remember some of the C-Mex guys coming by and dropping off water at the time. And back then, I think it might have been Builders Concrete. It wasn't C-Mex. No, I can't remember the name of the company that C-Mex bought, but it was the same guy, our same member, same company. Builders is actually Viking now. So, but as a community, as a Teamster community, our brothers and sisters were out there from other companies supporting us, and they walked the strike line with us. And that's what I remember, because I was 21, 22, give or take. And I'd never been through a strike. I was a shop steward at the time. And to see people who it didn't directly affect, but realize that, hey, it could be them next time. One of our other brothers and sisters could be on strike and they're going to need assistance, whether it's food, whether it's just moral support, right? When you have somebody who doesn't have to be there and they show up and they give their time to walk the strike line with you and do that. Those are all little bits and pieces, and that we can never forget that we're part of something bigger than just UPS. We're part of a national global organization of brothers and sisters. So never forget that when most of the joint councils send out newsletters and tell you, what's going on at the other companies. When you see that there's a potential labor dispute, hey, if you can just go down and donate an afternoon or a couple cases of water or walk the line with them, take your family with you. Honestly, take your family so that your family and your kids can see they grow up in that culture, right? Because so much of what's in the news tells people that unions are bad. We need to start, educating our family and our friends about the good things of unions, so empowering them. But just remember that if we were to go on strike, and once again, no one's saying we are, one of the main reasons we won that was public support. UPS got a lot of pressure from the general public about, hey, why are you messing with my UPS driver, right? Seriously, they were like, that guy's part of my family. He delivers to my house every day. He knows my kids. We've got to remember, we're not going to win this by ourselves. We're going to need public support. We're going to need support from our other brothers and sisters from the other companies. And that will, like I said last time, I have no doubt in my mind we'll win that if we stay together. But we have to stay together.
Agreed. That's heartwarming too, knowing that there's others who care about our situation. And I think that should be encouraging to anybody listening to this, that we're not in it alone. And there are other people who care about us, both our customers and our fellow Teamsters, who will come to our aid and stand by our side. And that's a big deal. So what's different now, 2023, from 97? What's the environment around UPS, about our current contract? What's changed? What are we looking at just going into this? Not even like what we're hearing right now, but going into this negotiating season, what has changed from 97?
Technology. I mean, number one, right? I mean, whether you were a preloader, a driver, well, those are probably the two biggest effects right there. The knowledge it took to load a package car and to deliver a route was, for the most part, in their heads, right? It was learned knowledge. Um, Now with all the automation, so much of it is it's automated, right? It comes on a PAL label and it tells you, and not that it's accurate, because I know package car drivers will tell you how bad it can be. It's not necessarily accurate, but it tells you, shelf one, space number. Back then, the preloader, say Tom was loading a set, he'd pick up a box, and they used to have these big long charts on the back of the package cars. And and you have to go and look. Okay, here's the brake and this and that. And pretty soon, your preloader that was on a set for a long time just knew these massive charts by heart and didn't even have to hardly look at them for the most part. Would grab it. Oh yeah, this goes there. So replacing us as workers was difficult, right? To get someone up to speed, that would take weeks and weeks to even be decent. Same thing with the package car drivers. They look at a box, which they still do now, right? They still know the route. They look at a box and they knew exactly where that was and the best way to get there. Now your newer drivers follow GPS for the most part, and so to replace us is become easier from a knowledge standpoint, and that's leverage, right? That's leverage in the company's factor, on their favor, I should say. That they have sort of taken some of the knowledge out and made it more just reading. That's why PVDs work, to be honest. Not that they do a good job of delivering the packages correctly, but they're able to eventually get it there because, hey, you put in an address on your phone and you follow the blue line, right? Versus Tom remembers when you were a new driver or a floating driver, you had this big Thomas guide, which was this book of maps, right? And you literally would take a copy a lot of times of the section of the route you were on, blow it up or make multiple pages, and then you'd learn all the streets and look at them and they were never really 100% because it would never tell you that it showed the road goes all the way through, but there's like 3 breaks. So you'd have to learn all those breaks by going down to a dead end street. Oops, I guess I got to go around. A lot of that's been taken away. So our leverage on that point is not as good. And the amount of independent operators from a truck driving standpoint out there now is just, there's a ton of them out there looking for work. And that's who would be, doing our feeder work. So that's not in our favor. But as I spoke to at the membership meeting the other night, to me, the key is one thing. It's the part-timers. If they can run these buildings, they can sort of get by with PVDs and subcontractors, at least to some degree, to get the stuff moved. But if they can't run these buildings, they have nothing. So our part-timers are key. And we've said it before, I don't think anybody disagrees. Our part-timers have to get the best raise in this contract, which, leads to another point to me. UPS is just massive profits the last 2 years, right? Well over double each year. And we're in a inflationary time where prices are just, out the roof. They've been protected from the fact that they've been under a labor contract and haven't had to pay extra wages and all that. So they've banked a lot of money and saved a lot of money. Strike or no strike, there's no way we don't get the best raises we've ever gotten. I personally, being in those negotiations, don't think that that's even the most difficult issue this time. I think part-timers are going to probably get a raise somewhere up to $20 an hour. Drivers are probably going to get we're going to get the biggest raises we've ever got across the board. And that is not UPS doing us a favor. They're actually doing that, especially with the part-timers. They're doing that just to survive. Because if they don't start paying them more, they're not going to have them. They're just going to, it's already happening, right? They're just quitting and going somewhere else. So what concerns me is we are going to get the best raises we've ever gotten. And UPS is going to try to turn that to their advantage and say, well, we gave you this great raise. So you should be willing to give up this language you already have or willing to accept this new term. They're in no position to ask for any concession or any massive change And that I have a feeling that's probably what's holding up the 89 supplement and the NorCal supplement, is they're sitting there trying to, force some change on us that we don't like. And in turn saying, well, yeah, but we're going to agree to these great raises and we're going to agree to this and that, but okay, that's fine. You need to pay the raises anyways. We've generated historic profits for you. You're not doing us a favor by giving us something better because you as a company have done better. So if there's one thing I would sort of err to caution to our members, don't just look at the financials of this next proposal or this next contract that's put in front of us. You are going to get paid better than you've ever been. You're going to get the best raise you've ever gotten, but at what cost? Right? At what cost? And what are we weakening seniority rights? Are we weakening the grievance procedure? Are we weakening bidding rights? Something. Because that's just the nature of UPS. They're not going to want to give something for nothing, even though they have no reason to not give those better raises. They're going to try to sell as if they're doing us a favor. And, if they try to shove something down our throats like that, those kind of things to me are just as important. And that's something for me personally. I would be a no vote if there was some massive language change that weakened the language we already have. Because when those changes come, they don't go away easily. In fact, sometimes they never go away. So we should be looking to really pay attention to the details, not just the money. And I know for part-timers, sometimes that's hard to do because you're working 2-3 jobs, right? So a big raise is, hey, that's a good deal. And that's understandable, but just make sure most of you have the intent to go full-time, and you don't want to vote for something now that down the road when you're full-time, you're going to pay the price for that, right?
Even if you're not, when you move, you're surrounded by friends. You want to leave your friends in that mess?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no reason. And to Adam's point, that's all the more reason to attend one, if not many, of those ratification meetings, so that you know exactly what is on the table other than just the financials. Well said, though, Adam. Well said.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. That old adage, there's no stupid question. I can guarantee you, a full room, you're not the only one with that question. Or once you ask it, somebody says, what? I didn't even realize that was part of the proposal, right? You're bringing attention to stuff. And we have all day to be there and to answer whatever questions need to be answered. So just make sure that you read through it thoroughly, highlight, mark, whatever, and ask every question you can so that you understand what you're signing on to for the next, 5 years. And I believe it's a 5-year deal. I haven't heard anything about changing, the term of the agreement from the historical 5 years. We did a 6 or a 7 year after the strike.
I believe it was 7 years.
Yeah, and that was sort of an issue of, hey, the two sides just went through this battle, to put some distance between that and sort of, because those, and even with that extra years, there's still some heartburn over that strike. People that were there who were through it on both sides of the table. Remember, we were fortunate in Visalia being a small building. We didn't have a hostile strike line, right? We didn't have fights and riots, but there's parts of the country where, it got physical, it got nasty. Package cars were flipped over when management was trying to go out and deliver, and so and there were some, they still hold a grudge for that. So the idea when extending to a longer contract after the last strike was to sort of distance ourselves before the next negotiations, right? To sort of lessen that so it didn't affect the next negotiation. But we'll see. Which leads to the next thing, Tom. We just mentioned, we talked about at our membership meeting. Our local union is still looking to figure out a plan for this. If we are on strike, how is that going to work? Where are we going to stand? How are we going to get members to and from the strike line? Because our building is on a 4-lane highway. There's not a lot of room out there. So we're going to have to figure out the logistics of that. So talk to your business agents when you see them at the building. tell them, hey, how is that going to work? Where are we going to do that? Because we're going to need to know that, right? That's important. We need space to do that, water, food, bathrooms, all that kind of stuff. And now the size of our building and the size of our membership, and that's going to be a bigger factor.
Well, to that point, speaking of hostile strike lines, an important issue in being a member during a strike is some knowing what not to do. Because there's the number one thing being you don't cross the strike line.
Right.
Why is that, Adam? Why is that important? Why, and what are some consequences of that should someone do that?
Well, we had a parking lot meeting, I want to say about a month ago, and the local union made it clear that they will be fining people for crossing the picket line. They haven't declared what that fine will be. I know they were going to reach out to the IBT and see if there was going to be a standard, fine that everyone was going to apply, if it was going to be done at the local union level. And they were going to get back to us on that, which that's probably something that maybe we can follow up with them, Tom, and report on the next video. But there will be penalties and fines instituted according to our local representatives for anybody crossing the picket line. So, and that's one thing, but more than that is just the fact that if enough people cross the picket line nationally, right, because this is a national agreement, it empowers the company to run their operation at least at a larger level than they would when nobody does. So it weakens, the ability to bring them to the table to get something reasonably done. And then it just creates, things when you go back after a strike, right? Now you've got people who cross the picket line, and that's was just talking to one of our people who transferred in from another local, and they had people that crossed the picket line, and those people just never, they lost a lot of friends over that, right? They lost a lot of relationships over that, because people are standing out there taking a stand for all of us. We're all doing it for not just ourselves but for each other, and for someone to cross the picket line because it's sort of self-serving, right? It is self-serving, at the detriment of their brothers and sisters. Those feelings don't go away. So we've got to stick together. Like I've said before, we've got to stick together. It's not going to be easy, right? Nothing about a strike is easy. And anybody that tells you, anybody who just, I'm ready to strike and I don't care, well, you should care, right? We don't go into a strike without a plan. But if it's necessary, it's necessary, and we stick together and we win, right? We win as a family. And I have no doubt that, if we were to come to a strike, we win as a family. But if we're divided, if someone crosses, multiple people cross, that's a bad thing.
Yeah. No, and too often you hear stories of, so many people and their families' lives are on the line, their livelihoods, and not only are you throwing a friendship away, but sometimes you're tapping into to really serious issues, and you've heard stories of those things escalating to a really negative level, and that's not good for anybody. And most of those guys, they've burned so many bridges by doing such a thing that they never really survive. They kind of get blackballed by the people they have to work around and stuff, and they just kind of become an outcast, and that's again not good for anybody. And we don't want to see that, and we definitely don't want the division. You don't want to take away the power of our unity and us being unified as a people, because that's that is what the union is all about, and that is our leverage. And this is all about doing for each other. It's kind of like brothers and sisters going to war, right? And somebody abandoning them in the middle of a war. It's not good, and you're leaving somebody you should be caring about behind, and so you don't turn your back on everybody. What else would we be looking at? You mentioned that we report to those lines. We're gonna have to figure out the logistics. Obviously, we're probably gonna have signs. We're gonna be out there. What does it look like to be on a picket line? Tell us a little bit about that.
They'll usually have like strike captains, which is leaders for each shift, multiple leaders, and everybody's given signs, and they'll stage certain times where you're walking, chanting certain chants, as things about whatever's going on in the contract, and it's really what you're also trying to do, because you're out there on a public street, right? You're bringing public awareness to it. There's obviously this strike, if it was to happen, was going to get a lot of media coverage just because of the size of it. But when people drive by, they see the picket signs, right? You're telling them what's going on. You're bringing public awareness to it. There is some, public shaming of the company going on there that, and the company will run their media campaign saying, whatever they're going to say. I can almost see them now. They're going to talk about how we make good money and all of that. But like last time, we never just disagreed that we made good money, but we didn't want our pension taken over by the company. And it's not always just money. It's not going to be about money this time. It's not. There's no way for them to defend the fact of their financials that they can't pay more than they paid last time. And as you mentioned, Tom, in the earlier thing you were reading, the sentiment, the support for unions is now trending upward, right? You're seeing it with Starbucks, with Amazon, with all these companies that are now fighting to become union. There's a reason for that. And for the longest time, it was on the decline, because I think just, things were pretty good. But people are starting to see sort of the light that, the trend towards minimum wage jobs in America has just gotten out of hand, right? And while the corporate profits are on historic highs, have continued to grow for the last 20, 30 years, right? Yes, there have been recessions, but if you look at that trend line, they just grow and grow while wages have remained flat, very, very slightly increasing, very slightly increasing. So you're seeing a culture here in the United States where people are starting to go, wait a minute, I'm living worse on $20 an hour now than I did on $10 an hour 20, 30 years ago. It's just the cost of living isn't relative to what the average worker is making. That's our part-timers in a nutshell. Yes, they have medical and pension and things that most part-time jobs don't have. Nobody disputes that. But at the end of the day, they still have to pay their bills. And we said it before, the part-timers do the hardest work in the building, right? Load and unloading those trucks. They, for the most part, can't dictate their pace because that belt moves at one speed, right? They can stop the belt and do that. But at least those of us as drivers and package car drivers, if we get a good example, they can pick a pace, right? And it means they stay out longer, right? But if they need to stop, they just stop and take a break. But that doesn't make it any. It doesn't make that say that package car driving is easy, because I believe it is. It is extremely, extremely brutal work. But at least you're sort of your own. Tom's a full-time package car. He'll tell you you're sort of the master of your own domain once you get out there. There's no supervisor standing over you. They have the board and the GPS, but he's not in the car with you. The part-timers, they've got supervisors everywhere that are constantly pressuring them and the belt's staying on. And so part-timers just really need to be, $20+ an hour at this next contract. And then something that was brought up to me by one of our part-timers was, well, hey, what if I'm already at 20? Am I just going to get nothing? That needs to be addressed too, right? If you're already over 20, maybe you're a 5+ year employer, whatever the number is that gets you over that. There needs to be a number that says, hey, they get a good raise too. They don't just get nothing because they're already above it, or they don't get a little raise because they're already above it. Everybody needs to be sort of compensated for this higher cost of living, because they're paying the same price as we are for all those consumer goods. So we need to make sure that those part-time raises don't just help the people at the bottom, but also help the people that also have a lot of time in our building. Tom, as you know, say a quarter of them, the ones that came from the old building, they've got a lot of time in 10, 15, some of them 20+ years.
Mm-hmm.
So if they get just some small raise just because they've been there a while, that's not a good thing either. So that's all got to be worked out, and that's going to be something for our leaders at both the national and the NorCal level to figure out. I'm sure we'll have to get the calculators out and figure that out. But that's something, to me, 224s and part-time wage increases are probably the two biggest topics that I think have to be addressed. 6-day punches right after that. And then right after that would be subcontracting a feeder work, because they are subcontracting a ton of feeder work, especially during peak. And that's something that's always been a fight. We understand that there's certain fluctuations during peak that may not be able to plan for, so maybe a little bit of that. But it's almost like they guarantee those contractors loads. So when they show up and there's no load, where are they getting the load from? They're taking one of our loads, right? That's just a problem. We just need to train more feeder drivers and do our own work. So what do we have? We have part-time wage increases, getting rid of 224s, no 6-day punch, and feeder subcontracting. Those are probably your 4 main issues. Potentially strike issues. Those are the 4 that I see being the biggest strike issues. So,
in addition to continuing to keep what we have, no concessions whatsoever.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any. Okay, we'll stop subcontracting if you waive your seniority rights, or just something like that, right? Or you agree to this weaker grievance procedure, but we'll give you a raise. No, they're just not in a position to ask for concessions. I understand them fighting to pay the least they can. That's the nature of negotiations. But to ask for they keep claiming, if you look at their social media page, their Facebook page, it's all about flexibility. They need all this flexibility to do things differently. And what that really means is PVDs. That's what it means. It means PVDs, and it means instead of a 5-day work week, it's a whatever we say the work week is. And we want to work you whatever hours we work you, right? Here in NorCal, we have a 9 o'clock start time for package car drivers. With the exception of the 224s, it can be as late as noon. But at least they know, even a 224 knows, hey, I won't start any later than noon. They would love to just have random start times, whatever work weeks. That's what they mean when they say flexibility. It means they're going to change your schedule all the time. And that's just, for us as feeder drivers, because we're on a 24-hour work schedule, we have start times, from midnight till midnight. A floating feeder driver can tell you how difficult that is already. And some of that's just the nature of feeder drivers is, relative to what it would be, what truck driving would be on the street. And that's just the nature of that job. But we have protections there too, right? That we have guaranteed start times. Our start times are scheduled the week before, so at least UPS would love to have none of that. They would just, when you leave the day before, they'd give you your start time for tomorrow. And no one's family can plan around that, right? You've got to be able to know when you're starting and when you're potentially coming home, so that your family can adjust and you can do things with them or take your kids to the doctor. But they don't need any more flexibility on scheduling. They're making a ton of money. They're doing fine. That flexibility just means, us being more in a position we're basically captured in more in an on-call position than we are in a show up to do our job position. And we don't want to put our members in an on-call position anytime we can help it.
Well, and it seems to me that with record-breaking profits, the system's working for them. We give them more flexibility, they're just going to start screwing it up.
Oh, that's what happened with 224s.
Yeah.
Right? The sides believe that, hey, Tom will work the preload and then go out and drive, and you won't have to have extra, I guess, regular drivers because you can do that. And it's great for Tom because he starts his full-time seniority. He gets a higher average wage for doing 2 different classifications. He gets all the benefits of full-time, and then, eventually his seniority will take him to a regular package car driver. Never, and I was in those negotiations, never was that intended to be just a full-time driving job. It was a combo job. Now it's I don't know of any 224s that work the preload or work the twilight and drive. The utility drivers are still doing that, right? Which in essence, it was supposed to be the 224s doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously we if they need that, we just need to train more utility drivers where that's needed. And then that's up to the local union to track, right? If you got 20 utility drivers doing a route every day, then they need to start pressuring management to put on more drivers. But at least when the utility drivers are doing it, you can monitor how much that's being used. So that's just something that we need to, the 224s, like I said, that literally had the best intention in mind, and UPS used it and turned it around on our members. They were also the ones doing the majority of the 6th day, 4th, 6th day, right? And that's no way for anybody to live. I mean,
well, and we got rumors of regular delivery Sundays coming down the road too. So you're going to see more and more. This is an ongoing battle.
Our competition's already been doing it, right? Whether it's FedEx, Amazon, they already do it. Post office, and they could actually do it now. They could do a Sunday through Thursday shift. They just haven't instituted that service. And that's probably, to your point, that probably is coming, but that's fine. Then I guess I'm Sunday through Thursday, right? But I'm not Sunday through Friday and maybe even Saturday. And that's not sustainable, especially for a package car driver. They think management complains about, disability and people on workman's comp. The nature of package car driving is brutal, and they'll be lucky it'll be a MASH unit if you're going to continue to run package car drivers and part-timers for that matter, because they're running those preloads 6-7 days a week. That's not sustainable.
Right.
So, and hey, for the first time, I was talking with another driver the other day. A package car driver in Visalia never quit. Never. Right? There was a couple people over the years that decided to start a nice business and they left, and they were so rare. I can almost name them on one hand. Shannon Levering, Jamie Peck, first 2 that went out and started businesses or started a new career. But a package car driver in Clark, it's a great job, right? Especially for the cost of living. We're seeing package car drivers now, young package car drivers quitting.
Yeah.
They're just like, hey, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm being hammered with, 150, 180 stops a day, 6 days a week. There's with no relief in sight. That's never happened, and it shouldn't happen. People shouldn't quit because they're being just driven into the ground. Right?
I agree.
If they have a better
and the attitude of management hasn't changed much, if at all, and it seems unapologetic, and they're still using the same tactics on everybody.
Yep. 9-5 language. It's great language, but the penalty needs to be stiffer, right? Because they just pay those 9-5 grievances and just keep doing it.
What is a 9-5 grievance, Adam?
So
for those who don't know,
a package car driver has it's Article 37 to relieve them from excessive overtime. So you declare yourself that you want to be on the 9-5 list. And if you work over 9.5 hours, more than 3 days, so let's just say you work 10 hours, 10 hours, 10 hours. Come Thursday, anything they work you over 9.5 hours is triple time. And that's paid to you as a penalty. And then so you'll file with the union. The union will file the grievance. The company doesn't even fight those in local review. Hey, we're guilty. Okay, great. They cut a check. But the intent of the language is to stop the excessive overtime. Not to just, well, we can afford to just pay it, so keep paying it. Well, then the penalty needs to be so severe that when UPS absolutely has to do it, yeah, maybe we had to violate Tom once this week, and maybe next month there's a day where we went over. They're just doing it on a weekly basis. I've always said the penalty needs to be the equivalent or more of hiring another employee. Because if it's not, they're just going to keep doing it until it costs them as much as it is to hire another employee. That's the same thing for supervisor working grievances. One of the proposals I put forth is it would be 3 times your daily guarantee every time you catch a supervisor. Because if you figure in wages, benefits, pension, you're probably somewhere around 3 times. So if I catch Tom, the supervisor, working, and now you've got to pay 3.5 hour guarantee times 3, you're just going to hire more part-timers so he doesn't have to work. But if it's just like right now, it's double time, and it's only for the time you caught him, right? So if you catch him for 15 minutes, it's only for 15 minutes. That's another reason they do. They know you can't sit there and watch them the whole time. So, okay, we paid 45 minutes today at double time. Miles cheaper than hiring another employee when he actually probably worked all day, right? He just, when he gets caught, he stops. And when you walk away, he starts again. If I catch you, it's 3.5 hours at triple time. So if it's really that important for you to work, you'll have to weigh that, right? A supervisor will have to weigh that. Manager will have to weigh that. It's got to be a deterrent to stop them. And I've heard management complain, well, some people are just on the 9-5 list because, they want to get paid. Well, then fix it, right? Stop violating them. If you truly think, and I don't think that's, I think that's a extreme minority, if any, right? I totally disagree with that. But if they're doing it, then great. Then take it off. It's in your control, right? Put on another driver, move the work around. But you don't do that because it's just easier just to pay him and continue to violate that driver. Take the work off him. Take the work off him. And the contract says, hey, you sit down with the union representative and the driver, the center manager, and you tell, hey, what do we got to do to get you under 9-5? Well, hey, these stops over here always take me out, right? These things over here take a lot of time. If you're going to keep those on me, you got to take this off me. Those discussions aren't even happening for the most part. It's just, we'll just pay it. So it needs to be the enforcement mechanism for 9-5 needs to be strict. And you look at some of the other forums. One thing that's been brought up is, hey, at a certain time, I just bring the truck back. Right? That's been a proposal. What I proposed is, or what I think would be a good solution is, hey, I get to my 3rd day. Those days that I'm going to be violated, I can bring the truck back. Because your intent is to be off, right? And it's not, if you truly want to be relieved of overtime, you're not worried about getting paid extra money to work the overtime. So, hey, UPS Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you violated me. You need to know that if I can't get done in 8 hours, I'm going to return to the building in 8 hours or 9-5, whatever the number is, and I'm going to be done and I'm going home. That right there, they've had 3 days to realize they're violating you. So they can't say they didn't know that, there was a number that you were going over. Give a guy an 8-hour day, a guy, brother or sister, an 8-hour day. And if he goes over to 8.5 or 9 because stuff happened, so be it. But they always plan. And then when they try to plan it in a perfect world, right? Okay, we've given you exactly 9.5 hours according to our system. Tom can tell you as a package car driver, it never works that way. If you run it by the book, something's going to come up. So why don't you give someone an 8.5 hour day, which will probably turn into 9.5 hours. He'll bring the keys in and you guys will be done. But I think the only true solution is very, very heavy penalties, or the ability on the penalized days to bring the vehicle back a 9.5, and you're gonna have to fire up a utility driver or something. You've got utility drivers working the twilight, right? That you could say, hey, instead of working the twilight, we're gonna need you to come in here and finish, this route or these routes, whatever the issue is, or just hire more full-time drivers and spread the work out over a larger work group so that you don't have that issue. That's really the ultimate fix.
Agreed. Well, Adam, what are we hearing? Actually, I'm gonna read something, one of the updates from this last week, from the UPS Teamsters app. And this was on Friday, May 12th. Said a handful of subcommittees making up the UPS Teamsters National Negotiating Committee continued to meet as the first full week of national contract negotiations came to a close. On Friday, Teamsters subcommittees are costing out contract improvements and finalizing additional proposals to exchange across the table. Committee members, including rank and file Teamsters from across the country, are evaluating and strategizing union proposals around overtime protections, inside work rules for part-timers, and robust health and safety measures to protect workers from excessive heat and extreme or unsafe working conditions. Negotiating teams for the Teamsters and UPS will not convene for bargaining next week and are scheduled to return to the table in Washington on Monday, May 22nd. The Teamsters are preparing to introduce a slew of new proposals to improve the contract when the committees meet again. So, what's encouraging about reading that is it sounds like both sides are taking the extreme heat and unsafe conditions seriously. So that sounds like it's on the table. Other than that, we're not getting much other than proposals have been exchanged, and they both sides need a week to go over the opposing sides' proposals, which is understandable this early in those negotiations over the master for me, because there's a lot, I'm sure, to cover and try and figure out every angle that could be exploited in order to shut those down. What are we hearing? What you read the headlines too? I'm sure you have your nose in those stories even deeper sometimes. And what are you hearing, Adam? What's the kind of the environment surrounding the negotiations right now?
Well, a couple things. The national negotiations, as you said, just kicked off, so it's a little early on that. One thing, NorCal, and me and some our other brothers and sisters attended a contract rally up in Local 439 a few months ago, and the trainer there even spoke to the fact that everybody knows NorCal has the best supplement. And I mean, when you say that, you're talking wages, work rules, all that. So it's not unusual for NorCal to be, one of the last supplements to get done. Because they're always trying to chip away at what we got, right? Because they're trying to, weaken what the hard fought language we had in that contract. So that's no different this time. And the 89 supplement in Louisville has also been one that has always been, contentious. It's been it's sort of the highlight of several negotiations where they've held out to the end and even not agreed for a long time. So both of those groups, I say this to our brothers and sisters in Louisville, hey, stand behind your reps, right? NorCal members here in California, stand behind your representatives, and do not make them think that you're willing to take less. Because UPS is hoping that they'll frustrate them and pressure them and And if our members are saying, well, yeah, just, do whatever you can get, that's okay. Hold both sides accountable, right? Hold both sides accountable to the great things you have, and expect the best. I think the 224s are going to go away. I don't think anybody likes it, to be honest. I don't even think management likes it, because they can't manage it, right? It's sort of just a thing that doesn't work for them either, to the most part. But they're like, once again, UPS will act like they're doing us a favor by getting rid of it. And to get rid of it, we need you to agree to this, whatever that may be. I'm a little concerned, because they're going to come up with some whatever thing, and we just have to make sure that them doing the right thing doesn't cost us something we already have, right? If it's something truly new, right, and they need this new whatever language or whatever they need, and it's truly new, then yeah, we should take a look at that and see whether or not it's something that can work for both sides, or is worth getting something. But for them to say that they're doing us a favor by getting rid of 224, they're not doing us any favors. They abused it. They took advantage of it, and it's just time to get rid of it. So that's not, we don't owe them anything in negotiations to get rid of 224s, or to not be forced in on the 6th day, or for part-timers to get paid a decent wage. We don't owe them anything for that. So don't make sure you talk to your representatives and tell them, hey, stay the course. We're not pressuring you to agree to something. Stay the course. Don't give in to that stuff. And I really think that we have to let our part-timers know that, because they generally, because they're newer, have less knowledge on how everything works. And it would be easy for them just to get a good raise and go, well, hey, that's a great deal. And then 5 years down the road, go, well, what do you mean I don't have that right anymore? Well, yeah, when you got that nice raise, that's where it went. So we've got to stay educated. And if you don't know, Tom mentioned, check out the UPS app. At UPS, we just recently started an educational committee, and there's 13 of us that are putting these flyers together every week to 2 weeks. I think we're going to get on an every 2 week schedule. And it talks, and they're just contract rights, right? And we've done one on supervisor working. We just did one on seniority. So when you see those committee members out there, hit them up. A lot of them are shop stewards. Some of them aren't. So hit those people up. Get as much knowledge as you can, because that way you'll be better informed to make a good decision to come ratification time.
By the way, one of our brothers out there in the education committee gave me some good information and hooked me up with a YouTube channel that actually does a reading. They do a read through of the national contract. So for those of you who are like me and are able to retain more information from audio versus reading, then I would say I'm going to put a link in the description to that channel, so you can go and listen to the contract and listen to it maybe over and over a few times. Get some of those ideas in your head, get some of those restrictions, those rules of operation, so that you really understand the safeguards in place around our job. That being said, moment of truth, Adam. Everybody's been waiting. They read the title of the episode. Are we going to strike? Obviously, I'm going to do a preliminary statement of no one, and you know this coming into this episode, no one can tell you the future. No one can tell you, yes, we're going to strike. No, we're not going to strike. Absolutely not. So this is opinion moment based on all the information that we have surrounding the current situation and negotiations, judging that against our past experiences and what we're hearing here and there. Adam, I'll let you go first and give us your percentages. What do you think? And of course, this is purely opinion, guys. This is purely opinion.
Well, before the strike started, and it's just me looking at the issues at hand. You know, I follow several member forums. Just the temperament of, you know, the business that we're in. Told people before, I think it's the greatest chance we've had of a strike since '97. That being said, I kind of thought from the outset, I gave it about a 25% chance. Thinking, you know, and I mean, and the reason I say that is just I see an avenue to fix the issues we have, right? And like I said earlier, a lot of them don't even cost UPS anything if they just follow through. Literally, I mean, we shouldn't be we shouldn't be trading a proposal to get payroll errors fixed, right? They should be like, hey, listen, we need to pay our people. So the issues are resolvable. So I'm not one of the ones on the fence. You know, you hear a lot out there that literally guaranteeing a strike. And most of that's, you know, member based. It's not, I haven't heard that from a union official. But and I think a lot of us were sort of concerned that people were guaranteeing a strike before they heard what the proposals were. But just, you know, the temperament out there and the fact that, you know, members are fed up with certain things. And I gave it about, you know, 25%. Now, I know national negotiations have started. Our local representatives say that they feel that the sides look like they're looking to get an agreement within the next month or two. That's good news. But like I said, they just started. And literally any proposal in both sides negotiation can change that drastically. You know, what both sides think is probably going to agree to. There's always something in every negotiation you think isn't going to be an issue that is an issue. And at the end of the day, and this is what I think all of us have to remember as members, regardless of what's sat in front of us as a proposal, it's our vote, right? And the contract, it's not like, well, here's what it is, that's how it's going to be. No, you vote on it. And if you don't like what's in there, if there's stuff you can't live with, you just, hey, vote no. If it works for you and you feel it's a fair compensation and you can live with whatever language changes, then it's a good deal, then vote yes. But don't vote no because someone, or just because you were told, right? Now, if someone gives you good information, and that is relative to you, then that is what it is. But to your question, Tom, you know, I give it about a 25% chance that we end up on strike. And I'm sure I'll catch some heat both ways for that. Some people will say that's excessive. Some people will say that's not even, you know, it's much higher than that. But that's just me based on, you know, being in those negotiations twice. I'm sort of reading the room, as you say, and now sort of reading the internet too, kind of what you hear people talking about. And you try to vet out the real extreme arguments on both sides. That's just kind of where I see it. Why you?
Well, I got to tell you, you're kind of making me feel really good about my assessment because I came to the exact same conclusion. Honestly, coming into this year, I was a little worried. I would have almost given it a 60% chance that we're strike, which is high for me. I feel like that's a real high percentage or possibility. And what worried me is they've automated so much, right? You talk about it. We got GPS now. We've got a mapping system that maps out your day for you before you've even left the house. We have eyes on everything's in your truck, what's in there and how many for each delivery point, right? They've experimented with PVDs. They're using personal vehicle drivers, bringing them onto the site and utilizing them for what, 3 years now, and so now they have experience. They feel like they've got it. There's a system in place that I think they thought would benefit them coming into this year. And I think they had things set up in a certain way that they wanted to be able to challenge us coming into this negotiating year. But then the reality of how much they're making off of us. On top of that, we're losing ground in our wages. keeping up with the cost of living. Cost of living is going up. We're sliding backwards in our wages because we're not keeping up with it. And they've done a lot of hiring. There's a lot more of us now. And I think they were hoping that we were weaker than we were. The internet has benefited us. I think Teamsters across the nation are more communicated with between each other and more connected than ever before. I think we're more informed in these negotiations than we've ever been. And I think we understand the strategy. And I don't think UPS was ready for as strong of a union as they're seeing this year. And I think that they've reevaluated from what I've heard. I think they've reevaluated their positions. I don't think they're ready for this fight. And I think they know that they have no ground to stand on for this fight. And most of all, I don't think they want to lose money, because that's where it hurts them the most, especially the stockholders, is losing money. You hit them in the pocketbook and they're going to fold. So they are in business to make money, and we're making them money. And in my mind, there's no way they're going to take a risk just to push back at us, just to save a few pennies in order to keep what they've got and risk it all. That makes no sense to me. Most of those guys understand math, and most of those guys understand that it'd be better to just keep operating and keep making record-breaking years if they can. And if this isn't one of those, that's fine. They know that it'll even out and come back around, and they'll start making money again. We're not losing money this year. It's just slowing down a little. So I've come to the same conclusion you have. I think we've got maybe a 1 in 4 chance that we're going to end up striking if they get stupid, which UPS is capable of from time to time, about an issue when they could just keep making money. And we should be making some money with them, at least keeping up with the cost of living with what we've had 5 years ago. I understand that we make more in the industry, but right now we're making less than we have in our own company because of that cost of living. So we need to be caught up. And in my opinion, because of their record-breaking profits, we not only need to catch up, but we need to make more. And so just because of that, I don't think they have a good enough fight in them. And I don't think they're as ready. And I think they know that now. I think they're just poising to try and look good at this point and try and get what they can. But I think ultimately they're just going to fold. We're going to get what we deserve, and life will move on. Remember, guys, this is just an opinion, and we can't see into the future. But that being said, we are going to stay strong with you. We're going to stay unified with you, and we're going to be right out there if we need to be. We're going to be right next to you, and we're going to be talking. We're going to bring some burritos, maybe. I think Adam's going to bring the burritos. Maybe he'll bring some steaks too.
Well, it goes by seniority. So the lower you are in seniority, the more food you have to bring. So
there you go.
I think, Tom, what is your seniority, Dave? By the way?
It's less than yours, but I'll go find somebody else. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for joining us in this discussion today. Very important discussion, more pertinent than ever. And we would love to know what you think. What's your percentages? How good are you feeling about this? How ready are you? Send us an email at teamsterstalk@gmail.com, and we would love to open a discussion with you and hear your comments. Adam, thanks again for doing this once again. Great episode, and I look forward to the next one.
Tom, thank you again. Tom does all our editing and our logistics, and he does an amazing job. After he gets done, puts it all together, I watch him and I'm like, wow, he actually made us look good. And so he does a great job, but he cleans up all my mistakes too. So something I wanted to bring forth. This is this will be episode 4 once it airs, and the response from the members is driving this channel. Me and Tom talk about it all the time. The thank yous and the hey, keep informing us. And I mean, it's a daily thing that you guys you're inspiring us to not only continue this, but to continue to improve it. So like Tom gave you the email, you can send us stuff if you want to send us something privately. You can hit us up at work. Most of you have both of our numbers, however you want to communicate with us. But thank you again for taking the time. And I know you're all busy, and these videos are, roughly about an hour when we get them done, to listen to what we have to say. That means the world to us, to me. And so thank you again for that. And if you get a chance, as you all know, that the YouTube lines, like and subscribe, right? If you can subscribe, especially because that way when we send these out, you get the automated message that, hey, there's a new video. Otherwise, we've been doing it, we've been sharing it on social media. We've been sharing it via text. But man, if we can get more people to subscribe, right, you would get that automated as soon as this gets released, or these future videos get released. You'll get them immediately. So that's a great thing. So once again, Tom, thank you again for always doing all this and putting all the logistics together to this. Thank you to the members for watching, and we will see you soon. See you at work.